Welcome to Beyond Billable, Lessons from Lexpo. My name is Pim Betist, and I'm founder of Clay Richard, Legal AI Consultants. Broadcasting from Lexpo, the legal innovation event, we're diving into the future of the legal sector. In this special series, you'll hear directly from the experts and visionaries at Lexpo about how to future-proof your firm. Practical ideas and honest conversations about the impact of AI on your legal department or practice. This is the English version of my conversation with Marloes ter Huurne, psychologist and author of The Lawyer's Brain. In today's world, we have the amazing ability to have a conversation in Dutch and use AI to generate an English version for you. Now, I get it, listening to two AI-generated voices for a long time can feel a bit odd, so we've kept this episode short and sweet, but it's packed with valuable insights. Marloes gave a keynote at Lexpo that wasn't about technology, but about something more fundamental: behavior and psychology. We talk about why the legal field so often resists change and how you can actually turn that resistance into progress. Marloes explains that real innovation in law firms doesn't just depend on strategy or AI tools, but on leadership that builds trust, fosters psychological safety, and strengthens people's belief in their own abilities. I hope you enjoy this open and practical conversation with an expert who helps lawyers better understand how they work. We're here today at Lexpo 2025. You just gave a keynote. You're a different kind of keynote speaker than I'm used to. It wasn't about tech, but about psychology. You just mentioned that believing in your own abilities is important. To put that in context, the legal sector is clearly facing a big transformation as events like this show. AI is going to change law firms and legal departments in a major way. But making that change happen is a challenge. You just shared a lot about how leaders can do that well, and you talked about the importance of believing in your own abilities. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure, the legal sector isn't exactly known for being innovative. People have been saying for a while that law firms should have started earlier, and belief in your own abilities plays a big role in this. I work with lawyers, especially junior ones, and I see a lot of imposter syndrome, this constant feeling of, do I really belong here? Many even have dreams that they forgot to pass an exam, which says a lot about how deep that doubt runs. People are working incredibly hard just to prove they're good enough, but performance is better when you believe you can do it. If you believe in yourself, you'll take action. If you don't, you hesitate, and that hesitation is a kind of self-handicapping. Perseverance depends on belief. In a sector as critical as law, I always stress how vital it is to build confidence in ourselves and each other. Lawyers are trained to avoid risk and anticipate problems, which can lead to a very cautious mindset. But creativity requires a leap, and that leap starts with self-belief. Everyone can be creative, but you have to practice, experiment, and be willing to start. And you won't start unless you believe it's worth trying.
In the legal sector, there seem to be two strategies to drive change: the honey approach, make it appealing, and the stick, do it or fall behind. What's your take?
Honey always works better. Motivation comes in different forms. Self-efficacy is believing, I think I can do this, and that gives people the push to try. Then there's intrinsic motivation. When something feels interesting or worthwhile, people naturally lean in. You have to create space for that, guide people gently, and help them have positive experiences. Extrinsic motivation, like rewards or threats, can work, but it's less sustainable. Honey is extrinsic too, but it's closer to intrinsic. Still, for some people, a little stick is necessary. I mentioned Simon Sinek. He wrote The Infinite Game, where he says don't try to beat others. Just aim to be your best 10 years from now. Compare yourself to your past self, not others. Improve because you believe in what you do, not because you're trying to keep up.
So the stick doesn't really work?
Only in the short term. Every year it's like we race to win, and in January we hit reset again. That cycle doesn't build anything lasting.
You also talked about criticism. The stick can feel like that too. What impact does criticism have?
Criticism hits harder than we think, especially in training-heavy environments like law. It's common and necessary to point out what's going wrong. But feedback touches three fundamental human needs: a positive self-image, a sense of belonging, and a feeling that we understand the world. Criticism says you're not good enough, not part of the group, and not getting it. That's why it hurts so much. If I trust the person giving me criticism, if I know they support me, I can handle it. I'll think, this person means well, they believe in me. That's why trust is crucial. You can be blunt, as we often are in the Netherlands, but without that trust, people shut down. They lose confidence and stop trying. When you say to someone, you're not using AI, it's actually a layered criticism. You're implying they don't understand the world around them, that they don't belong, and that they're not smart. That lands hard. The reaction is often withdrawal. People just keep doing what they've always done.
How do you guide people instead?
You make it accessible. Many people avoid something new because it feels too complex. They don't know where to begin. You have to guide them gently, like learning to drive. You don't start on the highway. You begin in a parking lot with someone next to you. Then you try a village road. Eventually, you make it to the highway. It's step by step. Once someone gets a small success, hey, I can do this, they gain confidence. Then they start noticing others doing it too and think, I could do that. They get more curious, use it more, and get better. That's how you build belief, and trust is the foundation of that process.
What do you need to do to build that trust in your organization?
You start by being open yourself. Get to know each other. Share something about yourself. Don't stay at surface level. Ask deeper questions. I teach a leadership course for mentors in law firms, and a common concern is, I'm 20 or 30 years older than the trainee. How do I connect? The trick is to avoid hierarchy. Talk about your hobbies, music, what you did over the weekend. Ask what they're into. Share what you struggled with as a trainee. You also have to show vulnerability, even though that's a scary word. Talk about mistakes, so they're not taboo. Otherwise, everyone wears a mask, trying to seem perfect, and that kills trust.
And what happens when you're open?
Openness creates reciprocity. It works better than asking someone to just open up. When I share, I set the tone. If I share and listen well, you'll likely share too. It builds a culture of openness. If you, as a leader, say, sorry, admit mistakes, or just share that you had a tough day, you normalize that behavior. Others follow. A lot of leaders say, my door is always open, but younger employees don't always experience it that way. Saying it isn't enough. You have to make them feel it and show it.
At some companies in Silicon Valley, if you make a mistake, you even get a trophy for it. Is that what you're saying? That it should be okay to make mistakes? Do you have other tips for changing the culture around that?
Yes, exactly. Some firms have a partner share the biggest mistake they ever made during onboarding. That sets the tone. Mistakes happen, and you can still succeed. It helps build psychological safety, creating a workplace where people feel safe to speak up. Amy Edmondson coined the term. She studied hospital teams, expecting the safest teams to report the fewest errors. But the opposite was true. The most psychologically safe teams actually reported more mistakes, not because they made more, but because they talked about them. The worst performing teams hid their mistakes, which meant no one learned from them. When people trust their colleagues, they're more likely to say, I messed up. How do we fix this? If they don't feel safe, they keep quiet and the whole team loses.
Honestly, it feels like an uphill battle in law firms. There's so much pressure to hit billable hours. It doesn't matter if you're efficient as long as the hours are there. But that model is under pressure. Any advice for managers navigating that?
Yes, stop focusing so much on the hours. My husband's a lawyer, so we've had many discussions about this. He says, we need to track them. Clients want accountability, and that's fair. But research shows that when you make hours less central, they stop being such a stressor. Right now, they dominate performance reviews. Timesheets circulate, and everyone sees each other's totals. That creates tension. Sure, you can monitor hours, but don't make them the core focus. Manage for enjoyment instead. If people are motivated and enjoy their work, the hours will follow. That means tapping into intrinsic motivation, finding out what makes people thrive. I know that can be tricky, especially with younger professionals. They might say things like, this doesn't give me energy, which isn't always helpful. But it's important to help them see that not everything has to be fun. Sometimes the value is in the learning. They just need clear support to connect those dots. And with AI, we're heading into new territory. A lot of junior work, the traditional training ground, is being automated. So, how do we teach the next generation to review and supervise AI generated work at a high level? That's a whole new kind of training. So, yes, we need to shift the focus. Ask, how do I get the best out of my people? Not by squeezing them, but by creating an environment where they want to work. Autonomy plays a huge role here. I always think of a story from a training I gave. Two trainees were exhausted. One was cheerful, the other grumpy. The grumpy one said, I worked till 2 a.m., doing tasks for 3 different people. I'm just frustrated. I was doing other people's work. The cheerful one had also worked late, but said, I'm running a case almost by myself. I had an idea and followed it. I even spoke with the client. I'm buzzing. Same late hours, but one felt drained, the other empowered. The difference? Autonomy. That's what you want to give people. If they feel ownership, the hours take care of themselves. And AI can help with that. It lets junior lawyers take on more complex work sooner. That's motivating. That's where the value is.
Managing for enjoyment. I love that phrase. It might be the title of this podcast episode. How else can you do that?
Autonomy, yes, but connection is just as important. It might sound like a buzzword, but it's essential. People need meaningful contact with colleagues and a sense of purpose. Since COVID, we've been working remotely more, but it turns out those informal chats at the coffee machine are vital. Kilian Wawo studied this in Het Corporate Breen. He found that working alone at the kitchen table really isn't good for collaboration or mental health. So be in the office together when you can. And make social activities inclusive. Don't make everything revolve around drinking. Instead, encourage shared lunches or walking meetings. It's about feeling at home at work. You don't need to be best friends with everyone, but it really helps to have a few people you trust, someone you can talk to if you're stuck or just share your weekend with. That connection boosts motivation.
I'm picturing someone very analytical, thinking, what am I supposed to do with all this enjoyment stuff? If we move away from billable hours, how do we avoid becoming vague? People still have to work hard. Are there more concrete ways to manage this?
Yes, and this is where leadership matters. Mark van Vugt wrote about the difference between power and authority. You don't want power, that's micromanagement. Authority is built on trust and natural leadership. It means giving people freedom and knowing when not to interfere. A lot of things go wrong because leaders do too much. Professionals, like lawyers, don't need constant managing. What they need is to be inspired. That's also leadership. You don't manage the work. You manage the learning curve. Give guidance, create space for growth, talk openly about mistakes, and offer real support. But then you have to let go. That's how you build true authority.
That's super interesting, but you can go too far with being open and risk losing authority. How do you keep that balance?
It's more subtle than people think. You have to know when to step back. Mark van Vugt describes it well. Imagine you're going sailing with a group. One person is experienced, the rest aren't. On the boat, everyone naturally looks to that person. They become the leader. But once you dock and head to the pub, that authority ends. They don't decide what drink you order. Leadership is context dependent. It's about asking, who's the right person to lead right now? Often, the loudest or tallest gets that role by default, but they're not always the best suited. We need to be more mindful of that.
We've talked a lot about behavior, but if you want to influence behavior, you also need to understand the brain. Lawyers don't often know much about that, but you do.
True, though I'm not a neuropsychologist, but I'm fascinated by how behavior is fully guided by our brains. If you understand even a bit, especially through evolutionary psychology, you start to see why we react the way we do. For instance, why feedback can hit us so hard. Understanding that helps you shape your environment to support the brain better. After all, the brain is the main tool lawyers rely on. If you don't care for it, it won't function well. Lawyers often run on willpower and reason. Psychologists are more attuned to their bodies. They'll ask, how does this feel for me? Lawyers tend to just keep going. That can be dangerous. I've seen people push themselves so far they crash. One lawyer told me, one day I just couldn't get out of bed. But there were signs earlier: short fuse, irritability, foggy thinking. People ignore those signs. As long as they can get up and get to work, they think they're okay. It's like telling your kid, no fever, you're going to school. That's the mindset. But when your body finally gives out, it's serious. I've seen stress so bad it causes tinnitus. When that happens, you could be out for a year.
So how does the brain manage that? How do you keep it healthy?
It's your responsibility. If your brain is your tool, you need to maintain it. just like a gardener keeps tools sharp. But there's very little awareness about this in the legal world. So here are some essentials. Get enough sleep, eat well, limit alcohol, and take regular walks, ideally 20 minutes or more. Young lawyers often treat themselves like top athletes, pushing hard, fast, and always striving for perfect. But the brain doesn't thrive under constant pressure. What it really needs is daily movement and social connection.
Why is walking so important?
It ties back to how our brains evolved. In hunter-gatherer times, stress made us restless, motivating us to move and search for food. While moving, we had to stay alert and aware of our surroundings. That's still how our brains operate. Walking boosts circulation and cognition. You become more focused and mentally sharp. I do all my coaching sessions while walking. You're outside and moving, which is pleasant but also productive. Your brain gets just enough stimulation to stay focused, and it's easier to talk about tough topics side by side than sitting across a table. Plus, you retain more. When I recall a walk, I can remember exactly what we talked about at certain spots. Your brain links movement to memory.
So it's about intensity. Walking really is good, right?
Yes, especially at a slightly brisk pace. It supports social bonding and builds emotional intelligence too. When you walk and talk, you develop empathy and self-awareness. And you can strengthen EQ in other ways, like engaging with art, really looking at a painting, reading a novel and putting yourself in the character's shoes, or listening to music. Musicians often have higher EQ because they express and interpret emotion regularly. These small brain insights can make a big difference.
That's so relevant, not just for health, but because AI is taking over more of our cognitive tasks. What's left is creativity and emotional intelligence. And you can even use AI creatively, like recording a voice memo on a walk and turning it into text with a language model.
Exactly, that's a brilliant use of it. Combine the best of both worlds.
Are there any other ways to strengthen EQ?
Yes, and it really starts with awareness, understanding what EQ is. It's about self-knowledge, being in touch with your body, asking yourself how you're feeling, why you reacted a certain way, and it's about being honest with yourself. Another great tool is journaling, writing something every day. I'll admit I don't do it myself, maybe because of my legal background, but people who do it, it really works. I use it in coaching too. I give free writing assignments. Just write for 10 minutes without stopping. Thoughts come out that you didn't even know were there. I've experienced this while writing my book too. Ideas emerge as you go. You can't wait for it to feel right. You sit down and start, and something always comes.
So discipline really matters. That's encouraging. Lawyers tend to score well on that. Give them a list, and they'll work through it.
Exactly.
Earlier, you mentioned something called the Zeigarnik Effect. Since I've got you here, what is it?
It's the feeling you get when something isn't finished. It stays in the back of your mind. The psychologist who discovered it noticed waiters who could remember multiple orders without writing them down. But once the bill was paid, they forgot it instantly. Turns out, our brain holds on to unfinished tasks by setting up little loops to push us to complete them. It keeps using background capacity, even long-term memory, and not all of that is conscious.
But how do you record that in a timesheet?
That's the tricky part. I've heard people joke, my colleague even logs their bike ride because they got an idea during it. And honestly, that's fair. Those ideas really do come that way. But it's not something you can capture neatly in a timesheet. We need to let go of the obsession with measuring quality and time so precisely. You can't always pinpoint when an idea forms. You might reflect for hours and only get the result a year later. But those hours were part of it. It's not always traceable. And that's okay. Just let that idea go.
Thank you so much for this great conversation.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Billable, Lessons from Lexpo. This podcast is a collaboration with Neo House Amsterdam and Lexpo, the legal innovation event. If you have any questions following this episode, please email us at hello@clayrichard.eu.